News from across the Federation, spanning the region and covering the globe. This is the Kiss FM SKN News Now Evening Edition, your one true source for news. And now your presenter.
Good evening, I'm Ebony Brandon. Today is Friday, the 3rd of February 2017. This is the SKN News Now Evening Edition. Tonight in the headlines, nationally, opposition leader, the Right Honourable Dr. Denzel Douglas, says the recent comments of the local ambassador shows that government is in conflict with itself. Regionally, Syrian refugees are now stuck in Antigua and Barbuda following the U.S. travel ban. And internationally, a new Zika vaccine being tested is showing early promise. We've got the details of these stories and more straight ahead in this evening's edition of SKN News Now. As the Team Unity Coalition prepares to mark its second term in office, Labour Party representative for constituency number 3, Honourable Conress Maynard, has rated their performance as a big fat 0. Speaking with SKN News Now earlier today, Mr. Maynard said the government's performance netted it no points, especially with regard to morality and integrity.
The current administration took office almost 2 years ago, after the February 16th election, and they came into office with a wave of promises that the electorate had given their vote on. Some promises included $500 minimum wage, $500 extra per month for families earning less than $3,000 a month. Promises such as integrity in public life legislation or legislation activation, the introduction of the Public Accounts Committee, freedom of information, constitutional reform, and some other very big key issues which they campaigned upon. Fair share for all, no discrimination, no victimization. And as a recent social commentator said in the social media, if he were to rate this particular coalition government over the past 2 years, it would be one big fat 0. A 0 for morality, 0 for integrity, 0 for accountability, and 0 for dealing with the people's business.
In a recent Facebook post, Chairman of the People's Labour Party, Douglas O'Watley, gave his take on Prime Minister and PLP leader, Dr. the Honourable Timothy Harris. Harris's I got the O statement at a recent town hall meeting. Mr. Watley opined that the only O Dr. Harris has is the O in 0. He went on that the Prime Minister scored a 0 on morality, ethics, integrity, and team unity performance scales. Making reference to the PLP chairman's Facebook post, Mr. Maynard said that after careful consideration and observation, he is inclined to agree with the scorecard given by Mr. Watley.
And so I would have to agree with the commentator, who, by the way, is one of their foot soldiers who assisted them in reaching to where they are today, who has to say, if you are reasonable, and if you look at what the government of the coalition parties, or the coalition government of the three parties, CCM, PLP, and PAM, if you look at their record, based on their promises to date, it would be 0. Because they have accomplished no major promise in their manifesto. Save for if we were to give them 0.1%, is to remove the remainder of the VAT that remained on food and funeral expenses. It is probably the only promise they did make that they were able to keep, but none others. Everything else has been laced with deception, even down to paying sugar workers money, claiming that the government had owed the people money. But instead they went to Venezuela, a stricken country at the moment economically, to get 60 million US as reported by Venezuelans and by the minister responsible for public works, but only distributing about 16 million easy to sugar workers, some of whom never worked significant times in the industry. And so I would have to say that I will agree with the scorecard given by the gentleman who formed part of their foot soldier contingency that brought about or helped to bring about the change that we saw.
Mr. Maynard also stated that the tripartite coalition won the hearts of many citizens with numerous promises, nearly all of which they failed to deliver.
First, they entered office on a platform of deception. They were able to convince enough of the electorate to believe that the St. Kitts Nevis Labour Party administration was straying from its core duty of doing the best for the people of St. Kitts and Nevis. Although at the time the economy was booming with 6 to 7% growth, the Citizen by Investment program was at its all-time high, bringing in hundreds of millions of dollars into the coffers of the Treasury. We had a vibrant PEP program. We had the SIDF that was doing extremely well, being able to help a number of areas of development throughout the country, in tourism, in education, in infrastructure. They were able to convince enough people that that was not enough, and that somehow the government of the day was not to be given another term in office. And so they promised the world, but have not even been able to deliver an island.
Meanwhile, the Team Unity Coalition has announced that it will stage a week of activities in recognition of its second year in government. According to Ambassador Sidney Osborne, who is chairing the committee responsible for coordinating the week of activities, the events will commence on Sunday, 12th February. One of the highlights of the week, according to Ambassador Osborne, is a cabinet retreat in Nevis on Monday, 13th February. During the retreat, Mr. Osborne said he expects several long overdue pieces of legislation, which Team Unity promised to deliver in its first year of office but have yet to deliver upon, will be discussed, possibly as a result of accusations leveled against the Unity Coalition ministers in recent times. He added that a code of ethics will also very likely be discussed.
We have a cabinet retreat, cabinet meeting and retreat, and they will be going to Nevis for that. And there's some things which they will discuss. I know there's been a lot of talk about integrity in public life and things like that, and Public Information Act, things like that. And if I recall, the Prime Minister, Freedom of Information Act, the Prime Minister and also the AG spoke about some of the legislation in terms of good governance legislation, which they want to bring on board. But for Team Unity, I mean, we want to be ethical in government. And I expect in all of this, there could be a discussion in terms of a code of ethics as far as the politics is concerned and politicians. Because as politicians, you're really leaders in the country, and you're leading the young people. And you want to be able to, young people to be able to look up to you and want to emulate you because of goodness. And so when we look at a code of ethics in terms of politicians, we have the view that you must tell the truth. Tell the truth. Regardless of what the situation is, you know, you need to tell.
Continuing on the issue of ethical behavior and just having explained the importance of honesty in persons in public life, Ambassador Osborne, when asked if it's necessary to be truthful to everyone at all times, had the most interesting response to offer.
I think I could answer it a little differently. You must always tell the truth. But there are some things, because of the sensitive nature, that you will not be able to say. The truth be told then is that I can't speak about that particular issue. Don't dance around it and say a thing.
Okay.
Just said this matter is, whether it's a matter to do, a legal matter, whatever the matter is. Not so you don't dance around the truth. You just said, look, this is a matter which I cannot deal with.
Osborne, a senior member of the People's Action Movement, also said he thinks it's quite unfortunate that integrity in public life legislation is necessary.
It's unfortunate that you have to speak about integrity in public life for this reason. It sends a message that politicians are, in a way, corrupt. And so what you're saying now is that we want to make sure now that you have this legislation, integrity in public life, and tell you, well, certain things which are expected of you. But I don't think you need to have some more integrity in public life.
A leader of the parliamentary opposition, St. Kitts Nevis Labour Party, the Right Honourable Dr. Denzil Douglas, meanwhile, is convinced that the Team Unity administration is in conflict with itself. The absence of integrity in public life legislation in the Federation's laws was a major point of contention for the tripartite Team Unity coalition while in opposition. One of their major campaign promises to the people of St. Kitts and Nevis was the passage of integrity in public life legislation. Addressing Ambassador Sidney Osborne's contradictory statement concerning the passage of legislation safeguarding and ensuring integrity in public life in this week's edition of the government radio program Working for You, Dr. Douglas said it's evident that the government is in conflict with itself.
The government is now in conflict with itself over the need for integrity in public life legislation. The fact is that it has become a major political issue. And what is now happening is that they seem to be pulling away from it. And basically what Sidney Osborne is saying is definitely a clear indication that, first of all, it no longer is an agenda item. Secondly, they have conflict among themselves. And thirdly, you can see from the practice of the present minister that he really does not think that there is any need to have integrity in public life, because if he as a minister has created a company to begin to procure materials to compete with the private sector, then I really think that, the government does not really know what it is doing.
In other news, Prime Minister Dr. the Honourable Timothy Harris has made it very clear that his administration expects to see positive results from the police with respect to crime reduction. This week, Dr. Harris noted that every necessary resource has been placed at the police's disposal. And while he did not expect perfect results, a marked improvement over the last year had been expected.
We reorganized the police into directorates with greater focus on accountability and results. We have invested in police training, set up processes and systems which lead to reward, promotion and punishment in the security services. We hired a renowned international group, Bramsil Policing Advisors, to assist us in this regard. We expect that within a 2-year interval, some results would be realizable.
Dr. Harris also spoke to the 2-year probationary period stipulated by law for members of the Police High Command who are appointed to act in their new role before a substantive appointment is made. Making the point that persons will be rewarded based on performance, Harris then implied that revisions are possible if expectations are not met by the people in charge. In keeping with this, Dr. Harris issues what appeared to be a veiled warning to the Police High Command that there could be consequences if taxpayers do not see returns on their investments.
That is why when we introduced the new High Command, we say that we will give them 2 years for consideration before they could be formally confirmed. The 2 years was a reasonable strategy in keeping with good management practices the world over, that you reward people based on performance. And we had the expectation that they would be able to perform within a 2-year period, having granted them the resources that were required. It was also an important provision of the Police Act that persons at that high level should at least be given a 2-year acting appointment. So the law and the practice were in conformity. So this year is a time for us to see some results.
Irvin Welsh, owner and chief executive officer of the Petition Social Movement Positively Inclined, has revealed that the central theme to his crime response framework is understanding. We spoke with Mr. Welsh earlier today and learned that he has compiled a crime response strategy proposal dubbed Begin With, something he says he's been working on for almost a decade.
This is something that I've been working on for almost a decade now. The Positively Inclined would have started back in 2008, and in 2009 the first project that we did would have been, it was called Shame on Me, which was Shame on Me, Crime, Shame on Me. So it looked at essentially the same perspective that it originates in society. Crime is a symptom of our dysfunctions in society, and so this is essentially a build-up from that. For me, pursuing understanding over that period, to come to now to be able to articulate much more clearly what these problems are and exactly to what degree different factors affect the crime problem that we are seeing today. So penning it was just a matter of ongoing work all the time. Over these years, after that project, I would have been doing talks, would have been writing articles, a lot of work in the digital sphere, on my website, positivelyinclined.com and so forth. And all of those will look at different aspects. Everything from education, which is actually the schools are essentially a pipeline right into crime, where persons don't succeed in the academic sphere. Looking at education, health, business, world, all those different things were things that I would have looked at over the years, and then it would have led up now to me just articulated more clearly and more systematically to begin with in framework. But yeah, it's basically a product of all of that time spent in understanding and pursuit of understanding.
He also furnished details about his proposed crime response framework. Begin with.
The crime response framework basically looks at all aspects of society and the problems that are in it. It really focuses on understanding. That's the watchword, understanding what the problems are. And a lot of them are counterintuitive. Things that we don't even recognize that we do in society that then inform the actions of persons. So it begins with understanding that, and then it essentially looks at persons then readjusting what it is they do. It has 7 different intervention types that span from even before the person commits any offense to after the reintegration process. And you wonder how do you address before, but it begins with the idea that we all have the potential to commit a crime. And so it really looks at understanding why people come to that place of actually committing a crime, and then we can actually mitigate these problems.
Irvin Welsh voluntarily submitted his crime response proposal to the Ministry of National Security in June 2016. Despite the ministry and government's lack of response to his proposal, Mr. Welsh has continued to focus on formulating logical responses to crime in St. Kitts and Nevis and expressed the hope to us that someday the government will respond and hold further consultation with young people and hear their views on what can be done about the crime which affects them. Still to come in regional developments, several Syrian refugees en route to the U.S. are now stuck indefinitely in Antigua and Barbuda. several Syrian refugees living in Antigua and Barbuda who were anxiously waiting to resettle in the United States have to now wait indefinitely following the recent signing of the controversial executive order by U.S. President Donald Trump. The 4 refugees, who are among over a dozen kept in custody in Antigua and Barbuda, have been anticipating their move for nearly a year after they were granted asylum by the United Nations High Commission on Refugees, or UNHCR, and the International Organization on Migration, IOM. UNHCR local representative Michael Joseph said, however, the stroke of President Trump's pen reversed the approval, as his order not only restricts immigration from the 7 Muslim countries identified, but also suspends all refugee admission for 120 days and specifically bars all Syrian refugees indefinitely. In other news, St. Lucia's Director of Public Prosecutions has warned local media against revealing specifics of ongoing criminal matters. On Thursday, he reminded the local press that there are specific laws which prohibit any action that could prejudice the outcome of the case, and cautioned that there are serious penalties if those laws are broken.
The Director of Public Prosecutions says there are over 21 alleged police shootings under review by his office, all active cases. He says he has mapped out a way forward for the majority of those cases and in some instances has written to the Commissioner of Police expressing his opinion on them. He, however, asks for patience as the investigative process takes its course.
I must state that many of these matters are still incomplete in terms of the criminal investigations, and as such I cannot disclose details of any findings of what in particular is missing from these investigations, etc., as this would only prejudice the due process, right, that is expected in these matters. And I hope that everyone can appreciate that.
The DPP would not say much on issues that touch on the impacts investigation into the alleged police killings of 2010-2011. He rebuffed questions on talk that evidence remains in Jamaica and would only say that his office has a plan to tackle the issue but needs the public to be patient in this matter.
All speculation, my friend, all speculation, and we must stop this. I cannot alert you to anything that I have endeavored to do in this matter. That's crazy, right? I will not speak to where evidence is or where it's not, but I can say safely that I have reviewed everything reference to this matter. And there is definitely a way forward, which we are going to pursue. Definitely. Right? So we need to wait patiently. I know that persons have been waiting, but I want to just comment on that. The impacts report is not an investigation for the purpose of criminal investigation. As I said earlier, these matters still have to be, to some extent, completed in terms of the investigation for criminal proceedings, if any. So we must understand the distinction, not the impacts report and what it said and all of this, right? This is exactly in the face of what we ought not to do.
Green also updated the media on the Lambert's Academy affair. This week came word that criminal mediation in the infamous case has resulted in refunds for scores of suspected South Asian human trafficking victims. The DPP defended his decision to drop a number of charges and confirmed an over $1.3 million restitution payout for the students who were scammed in the matter. He would not discuss the human trafficking charge.
I withdrew this matter. I withdrew the 49 matters against him and I'm saying, in terms of what the criminal procedure rules provides, etc., as we are innovative in our approach and as the law develops, we went into the mediation proceedings and a favorable outcome was found. Case that part of the obtaining by deception, so
please answer the question,
is done. The matter of the matter of obtaining property by deception is done. I cannot speak to that at all. Right? Reference to the human trafficking matter. This matter is a distinct matter with distinct evidence to be sought, etc., and to be delivered to the court.
Responding to media comments that his press conference did not reveal much, Green says it disclosed as much as he possibly could at the time. He is assuring the public that while he cannot report at every stage of the process, his office is working hard to bring its backlog of cases to conclusion. He has promised more briefings with the press.
Former St. Vincent and the Grenadines opposition leader Anaheim Eustace says the Ralph Gonzalez administration's use of government lands as its principal means of raising revenue is inadequate and is a failure.
Former leader of the opposition New Democratic Party, Anaheim Eustace, made the claim that the government continues to mislead the public year after year by failing to raise revenues as forecasted in the budget. Eustace, who was speaking on radio on Tuesday evening, added that the ULP administration, in its attempt to govern the country on a surplus, has utilized the sale of lands as its primary strategy, and this has failed to yield the required revenues for development.
Here you have expenditure of 747 million, but you only collect 590 revenue.
So you're down in a hole.
That hole is the deficit.
Right, okay.
So the difference is the deficit, which in this case is $156 million. In other words, you then have to find some way to raise that money, because the amount of money you're raising at the present time, as far as this estimate is concerned, is only 590, but you're going to spend 747. Now, the 156 million has to be financed. So you may get grants to finance it from different countries or institutions. You have to borrow loans, external loans, to finance that difference. Then you have to have local loans, which you borrow here locally. And then you have to have capital revenue, like the sale of land by the government. And then you have something called other receipts, which is sale of things by the government other than land.
Eustace advised that the government is playing a dangerous game by what he said was the portrayal of fictional revenues, adding that it was time that drastic measures be undertaken so as to improve the country's fiscal standings.
There's no money there. They cut back the expenditure. They never had that money. Said not there.
Man.
But on paper, it's there. And if you, depending on how bad things are, you end up with little or no growth or negative growth. Because if you can't do your projects and so on to help create employment and so, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
So cutting back has to be done. That is one reason why we can't fix the roads today. We don't have enough fund to pay for lots of things because we don't earn that revenue. It's a fiction.
Coming up in the international segment of SKN News Now, the Myanmar government says it will not provide food aid exclusively to the Rohingya people. Details up next. An aid ship carrying food for Myanmar's Rohingya community has left Malaysia. However, the Myanmar government said it wanted to distribute the food to all communities. The Rohingya people have been facing an operation by Myanmar authorities after an attack on a border post by suspected militants.
Myanmar's government pushed Malaysia's leadership not to allow an aid flotilla to try to go into Rakhine State as it had planned. Instead, it wanted the aid to go to Yangon for the government itself to distribute to all communities in Rakhine, not just the Rohingya. In the end, the NGOs that organized the mission agreed to send a portion of the 2,200 tons of food to Yangon. They will then sail on to an area of Bangladesh that has been flooded with Rohingya refugees fleeing across the border. But the fact that Malaysia's Prime Minister himself oversaw the departure ceremony is likely to further inflame tensions with its ASEAN partner, Myanmar.
We will not continue to remain silent. We won't be satisfied with rhetoric. We want to make a statement, which is enough suffering for the Rohingya people. Enough is enough.
In December, Najib led a rally in support of the Rohingya, and Malaysia last month hosted a meeting of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation to discuss the issue. Myanmar's government contends that it's an internal issue and that media reports of the Rohingya's suffering are exaggerated. In response to Malaysia's criticism, Myanmar has said it will stop sending its citizens to work here in Malaysia, where they form a sizable portion of its foreign labor pool.
In 2016, the number of births in China increased following its landmark decision to end the country's controversial one-child policy and allow all parents to have 2 children. And while nearly half of the 17.86 million births last year were second children, the increase was much smaller than officials and experts expected. Bill Ide went out on the streets of Beijing to learn more about the policy's impact.
Hohai Lake in central Beijing is a popular place for families to have fun during the holidays. And on a cold winter day, a good place to gauge how the public is warming up to the new 2-child policy. Many we spoke with already had a second child or wanted to have another, but the cost of raising a child in China is a big obstacle for many. One man, surnamed Liu, says he and his wife considered having a second child, but felt the burden was too much to bear. Families in China spend as much as $1,000 to $2,000 each month on extracurricular classes.
Wish we could have a second child. One child on his own is too lonely. It would be better to have 2 children.
Education and activities are not the only expenses, says James King.
Of course, there's also travel overseas, which is very expensive. We try to travel at least once a year.
James and his wife Lucy, who have a second child, say the benefits outweigh the cost, but add that each family's situation is different.
In the future, a child must deal with 4 elderly parents, but having a brother or sister can make it easier to divide up those responsibilities.
Despite its massive population, China faces a growing demographic problem: aging. Its working population is shrinking as the number of pensioners increases rapidly. Starting next year, there is likely to be a persistent decrease in the number of children being born, experts say, as the number of women eligible to have a second child will begin to shrink as more fill their quota. For some, even having children is questionable. By a young single man who works in the hotel industry in Beijing has 2 older sisters.
Life is very stressful, but if I was to have a child, 1 would be enough. Either a boy or girl would be fine.
Like many of its Asian neighbors, China has a low fertility rate. And so far, the government has offered few incentives to encourage more births, aside from ending its one-child policy. And because of that, some critics say the policy shift may be too little too late.
A report on United Press International is suggesting that a new antiviral drug currently being tested is showing promise as a Zika vaccine.
UPI.com reports that a single dose of an experimental Zika vaccine protected mice and monkeys from the virus, according to researchers. Following Zika virus outbreaks in Latin America and some parts of the southern United States, scientists have been trying to develop a vaccine against the virus. One injection of the vaccine triggered a rapid immune response in mice and protected them from intravenous exposure to Zika 2 weeks later. That protection remained when the mice were exposed to the Zika virus 5 months after vaccination. The researchers also found that one injection of the vaccine in macaque monkeys provided strong protection against the Zika virus 5 weeks later.
And that wraps up the news developments this evening. Now for a recap of our headlines. Nationally, opposition leader the Right Honourable Dr. Denzel Douglas says the recent comments of a local ambassador shows that the government is in conflict with itself. Regionally, Syrian refugees are now stuck in Antigua and Barbuda following the United States travel ban. And internationally, a new Zika drug is being tested and showing early promise. Still to come this evening, Sports Zone. Stay with us. Tonight in Sports Zone, Super Bowl Sunday is just 2 days away, but statistics are showing that the globally popular sport is losing appeal. Over 100 million people will watch Sunday's Super Bowl to be played between the New England Patriots and the Atlanta Falcons. But the National Football League of America has finally lost some of its appeal. Television ratings are down around 20% on game days, with methods of consumption changing. Lee Wellings reports.
It has been held up as the perfect blend of sport and business for decades, a licence to print money as well as entertain. But the National Football League of America has finally lost some of its appeal. Television ratings are down around 20% on game days. While the Super Bowl on Sunday is expected to do its usual business, the ratings are an increasing concern to NFL executives, and they're trying to make changes.
So there are a number of things where we think we can shorten the management of the game, focus less on stoppages of the game and more on action. And we can do it with the right balance that will improve the quality of the experience either in the stadium or also on television.
Of course, the Super Bowl has the halftime show with the Stardust, in this case Lady Gaga. But why has American football overall taken a ratings hit? One theory is the modern appetite for bite-sized consumption rather than a heavy meal lasting 3 hours.
At this point, with social media being pretty much a mainstay and part of our culture now, I really believe that, we're so used to consuming content in bite-sized pieces that it makes it hard to sit through an entire game these days.
The league also tests loyalty by controversially moving franchises. The Chargers are leaving San Diego to become, curiously, a second team in Los Angeles. The transition to a new franchise, a new helmet, brutally swift. Meanwhile, the Raiders are poised to leave Oakland for Las Vegas, while taking regular season games to England and Mexico has shown they are prepared to take risks. But if NFL has a problem, it hasn't reached Super Bowl yet. In Houston, the excitement has taken over the city.
I love the Super Bowl, yes.
And what about the rest of the season? Are you still watching?
No, I really don't watch football.
Ratings in the NFL are down, but this is still special.
This is a special event. Absolutely.
America's game, football, so we all come out and enjoy it and have a good time.
What's absolutely clear is that Super Bowl shows no sign of losing its grip on the American public and sports fans beyond. The challenge for the NFL is to make sure that all those who are gripped by the game between the Falcons and Patriots on Sunday are still there enjoying the NFL when the league resumes in September.
An impressive 2-0 victory by Cameroon over Ghana on Thursday have secured the team's place in the 2017 Africa Cup of Nations.
Cameroon are into the Africa Cup of Nations final after beating Ghana 2-0 in their last 4 clash on Thursday. A second-half strike from defender Michael Ngadeu Ngajui and a stoppage-time effort from Christian Bassogog secured the 3 points needed for the indomitable Lions to set up a final on Sunday against Egypt. Ngajui snuck around the back of the Ghana defense from a free kick and took advantage of a mix-up to blast the ball into the net from close range. After 72 minutes, Bassogog then caught the Black Stars on the counter-attack as Cameroon added a second with virtually the last kick of the game. Cameroon, who were hampered by selection problems going into the tournament, will be looking to win their first title since 1982 against Africa's most successful side in AFCON history.
We have to be very good again on Sunday, but I know that the motivation will be more than the tiredness of the players. So I'm very hopeful for Sunday.
We have to play this game, so we will do everything also to win this game. Even this is not the game that we wish for.
Still in news from the Africa Cup of Nations, the hosts of the tournament, Gabon, may have bowed out of the tournament early, but local businesses are still in the game. Hotels, restaurants, and transport services are enjoying increased business from football fans and tourists. But as the tournament draws to a close, many Gabonese are jolted back to the reality of a struggling economy and the aftermath of the billions spent on hosting the tournament.
The Africa Cup of Nations has placed Gabon in the international floodlights, something the small country rarely enjoys. But a struggling economy has been the backdrop to what is supposed to be a celebration of African football.
In 2012, everyone was happy. Everything worked well. But this time, they've brought in politics.
Gabon's oil-producing economy has been hit hard by low global crude prices and falling output. Many believe the country's oil wealth is distributed among a small elite, with little trickling down to the majority.
There is no change. It is still the same. Business doesn't work. All we see here in the market are people selling. It's not working. It needs to change.
The AFCON Organization Committee, however, claims that the tournament has boosted business for the restaurant, hotel and transportation industries.
These stadiums built by the Chinese companies are benefiting the youth in those areas. There was direct employment during the construction of stadia in Oyem and Port Gentil. They generated 400 jobs.
Civil society and unions called for a boycott of the AFCON tournament. They say the money could be better spent on health and education.
The Gabonese refuse to accept these government policies because $853 billion spent on AFCON is excessive. With this money, we could have solved the problem of housing, the problem of overcrowding in education institutions, a lack of medicine supplies, poor roads and youth employment.
The tournament is currently in the semi-final stages. The final is due to be played in Libreville on the 5th of February.
And that wraps up this evening's edition of Sports Zone and the SKN News Now Evening Edition. On behalf of the entire team here at Kiss FM and SKN News Now, I'm Ebony Brandon wishing you a very pleasant weekend. Be sure to join us for the weekend edition of SKN News Now tomorrow at 11:45. Goodbye.